Hello and welcome back to another Parry This video. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit unique, especially for this channel, and we're going to be doing a tier list. So, how I came up with deciding to do this basically comes down to just a simple decision I made the other day. I decided I was going to watch a John Wayne movie, and I was going through my list of which ones I wanted to watch, and I clicked on an old reliable McClintock, and I gave that a watch, and I loved it. And it helped remind me how much I love so many John Wayne movies. And now for those of you out there who have never heard of John Wayne or just aren't familiar with his filmography, I'll give you a little brush up on it. He has over 140 movies, actually 140 exactly, that I could find that he was either the main billing star or one of a couple main billing stars that were pretty much equal on it. So 140 movies in his career. That's a lot. Now obviously it's nowhere near the top. Off the top of my head, if I remember correctly, I believe Danny Trejo has been in the most movies out of any Hollywood star. Of course, there's a couple other ones. I know Sir Christopher Lee is also up there. He's been in a lot of movies, but John Wayne had 140 movies that he starred in. And another thing on top of that is, you take someone like Danny Trejo or Christopher Lee, yes, very famous people, and they've had some very famous roles. The vast majority of their movies are either cult classics or vastly unknown B movies, like most people have never seen them. Whereas most of these John Wayne movies were the biggest pictures of the year, at least once you get into the 40s and beyond. A lot of his earlier stuff that he did in the 30s is not well known, and I haven't even seen most of it. So like I said, 140 movies. So I wanted to do a tier list. And so I went through and I selected 56 movies of his that I have seen. It's possible I've seen some of the other ones, but they were so forgettable or I didn't finish them or something like that. So I didn't include any that I wasn't 100% positive that I've actually seen all the way through. So we have these 56 movies and we're just going to be doing a tier list. I was going to rank them at first, but that was way too difficult. I was having a lot of troubles with that. So I decided tier list was better because it was easier for me to say definitively what tier each of these movies should be in on this list than it was for me to rank them. So we're going to just dive right into that, and I'm not going to be doing this in any particular order other than alphabetical, because I believe that is the order in which all of the images I've selected have been loaded into here. So we're just going to go right down the list, and I'll place them in the tiers that they belong. Now, this is all based on personal opinion. I'm not taking into account like other critic ratings and audience reception and all that sort of stuff. I don't care about any modern considerations with these movies. This isn't historically accurate. This is just all opinion based on how good the films are, how entertaining they are, how rewatchable they are, etc. And so we're going to dive into it with Three Godfathers, which is a solid B tier movie. This one is a story about these three cowboys, essentially, or whatever you want to call them in the movie, because I guess technically by definition they're not cowboys, but it is a cowboy type film, and they have to take care of a baby. It's an entertaining enough movie. I like it. I've watched it many times. I'll probably watch it many more times. I think it's well done. I like it. Makes it into the B tier. It's not fantastic, doesn't blow my skirt up, but it certainly is one that I can watch many times and find it enjoyable each time. I'm probably not going to do a full recap for each movie, but only the ones where it, pops into my head as particularly noteworthy. Next up, we have Allegheny Uprising, which is a solid C tier movie. This one is fine. I don't find it particularly great. It's not one that I want to rewatch many times, but I did enjoy it well enough when I watched it. I feel like I've probably only watched that one once, so maybe I should watch it again. But yeah, it's a C tier movie. Then we have Angel and the Badman, our first one in the D tier. So we're moving right down the list, it seems here. Angel and the Badman is one of his earlier ones, falls into what a lot of people would consider a B movie. Interestingly enough, Angel and the Badman comes out after a couple of his other movies that I consider to be quite good. So it's not super early in the career. I believe this is already in the 40s. But the plot of it falls into that sort of Sunday morning B movie kind of vibe to it. He's this bad guy. I think he might be a gunslinger or whatever, and he gets wounded and he's taken care of by these, I think they're Quakers, so they're real nonviolent or whatever, and it ends up kind of turning into a pseudo love story. It's fine, I guess, but I don't particularly enjoy it, and I've seen it and I'll probably never watch it again. Next up we have Back to Bataan, another B tier one. This one's a World War II movie. I believe it's a sequel to Bataan. This one stars John Wayne, of course, whereas the original Bataan did not. It's about liberating a POW camp in the Japanese theater of the war. I like like it. I've watched it a couple times, and I would watch it again if it popped on TV or if I had nothing to do on a weekend morning or something like that. So Back to Bataan, relatively good war movie from early in his career. Next we have Blue Steel, another D-tier movie. Falls under the same sort of thing as Angel and the Badman. It's not like it's atrocious and it's impossible to watch, but it's just kind of a boring B movie. Not much for it. Then we have Brannigan, another D-tier movie. This one I wanted to like more than I liked it because it's from late in John Wayne's career into where I genuinely like the vast majority of his movies. It's a cop movie. It's fine. I should probably watch it again. I don't think I've seen it for at least 10 years. If I watched it again, maybe I'd like it more, but maybe I'd also like it less. So I just didn't quite like it. It's hard to watch John Wayne as a cop after you've watched him as an Old West sheriff for so long, or I guess a World War II soldier. But yeah, I wish I had nice things to say about it, but I don't. Then we have our first F tier with Cahill, United States Marshal, another exception from his late career. I don't like this movie. I've tried watching it 4 or 5 times and, hoping that I would like it because it's sandwiched in with a bunch of his best movies are from late in the career like this. But Cahill, U.S. Marshal is just, it's boring for one thing. It's not a good movie. It's poorly paced. There's a lot of theme elements that I don't like about it, coming from a lot of your 70s nihilism getting pushed more and more into films, and a lot of that gets into Cahill, and it is just very contrary to pretty much all the rest of John Wayne's westerns, which for the most part were pretty hopeful stories, even if bad things happened in them. So I don't like Cahill, U.S. Marshal. I think its worst crime is just how boring and forgettable it is, especially considering how late in the career it was. So it's our first F-tier movie. Next up we have Chisholm, our first A-tier movie on the list. This one is a story about him. He's obviously playing John Chisholm in there. You always know it's going to be a good John Wayne movie if it has its own theme song written specifically for the movie, and that one is a banger. So Chisholm is a story about him as a rancher, and it kind of takes place as maybe the B-plot of what you'd call Billy the Kid's story. So Billy the Kid, as told relatively well, if not historically accurately, in the Young Guns movies, is a well-known American folktale. Well, I shouldn't even say folktale because it's about a real person, but, the myths have become far, far more large and well-known than the actual historical story there. But Chisholm takes place in the same area with a lot of the same characters and Billy the Kid's in the movie, but it's not about Billy the Kid, it's about Chisholm, who is played by John Wayne. So I like this movie. It's very well done. Excellent cast. I can watch this one many, many times, and every time I do, I enjoy it. So Chisholm is our first A-tier movie on this list. Next up, we have Flying Leathernecks, which is another one that we're going to put in the C-tier. This one is one that I always wanted to like because, again, I like a lot of his World War II movies, and this one comes out around a lot of the other ones, so the actors that you see in it and a lot of the writing styles are very similar, but I never liked Flying Leathernecks as much as I liked a lot of the other ones. I find it's fine, again, like Allegheny Uprising. It falls into it's perfectly watchable, especially if you've never seen it, and if you go a long time in between it, you can still watch it and probably get a decent amount of enjoyment out of it, but it just doesn't cut it to be a, top level John Wayne movie in my opinion. So Flying Leathernecks is a C tier. Then we have North to Alaska, another solid B tier movie. This one is probably what you'd call a non-violent Western. It takes place closer to the turn of the century. It has to do with, obviously this one's another one that has its own theme, North to Alaska, the song, but this one is it's about the gold rush in Alaska, and so you got Big Sam, and it's kind of a love story, but kind of also a government's encroaching on our freedoms type story, which were very popular at the time that this movie came out. All very well acted, very well directed, dialogue's great, a lot of the story beats are very entertaining. I like it, and I rewatch it relatively frequently, so North to Alaska is a pretty good movie. And that brings us to our first S-tier movie, Big Jake, one of my absolute favorite John Wayne movies, and this is what I'm talking about. This is a late career movie for him, one of his last 10 that he made. Very, very good. It's, I won't go into spoilers, and I'll try not to spoil anything for any of these movies. I hope I haven't already, but he has, I believe it's like his youngest son gets kidnapped in this movie, or maybe it's his grandson. I think it's actually his grandson, and he's this big rich rancher, and he's got to pay the ransom for his grandson, and it turns into, of course, a typical John Wayne action movie type thing, all set with the veneer of a Western. So I love this one. It's one of his best movies, of course, overall, otherwise I wouldn't have put it into S tier. Absolutely great movie. Can't say enough good stuff about Big Jake. If you're going to watch, obviously based on this tier list, by the end of it, if you're going to watch any of them, I would recommend the ones that I put in S tier, and this is one of them. So Big Jake's one of my favorite John Wayne movies of all time. Next up, we have Randy Rides Alone, another D tier movie. Again, another early one. I've seen this one probably a dozen times, not because I like it particularly, but because it got played all the time on TV. And back when that was all we had. I saw this one a lot. So Randy Rides Alone, kind of a boring B movie. I think if I remember the plot correctly, again, it's very forgettable like most of his B movies, but I believe he was framed for murder or something and had to get out of jail and ends up finding the real murderers or something along those lines. It's not great. And of course, it's very early in the career, so his acting is still a little not great. But that is a D tier movie. I don't ever feel the need to watch that one again. Next up, we have Flying Tigers, another solid B tier movie. This one's a World War II movie, takes place in the Japanese theater. This one, actually, interestingly, if I remember the specifics of the plot on this one, he's not an Air Force pilot in this one. They're actually a type of mercenary group, kind of as a way to get around the whole U.S. not being involved in warfare early in the war before it was actually declared. And so I believe it's like a private company of basically fighter pilot mercenaries fighting against the Japanese. Either way, real good story. Lots of entertaining dogfights in this one. Of course, it's got your romance B-plots and all your little drama and all that sort of stuff. But it's a pretty dang good movie. I like Flying Tigers. I've watched this one a bunch of times, and I'll probably watch it a bunch more times. So, solid B tier. Next up, we have Hatari, and this is one that I put in C tier. I know a lot of people that really like Hatari. It's one of their favorite ones. It's a comedy. I would say that the best way to describe this one is one of John Wayne's comedies. I don't particularly like it that much. I think it's well done enough, dialogue, acting, direction-wise, that it's not a bad movie, so it is rewatchable if you're into it. And it's got some moments that I find pretty genuinely funny. So C tier at best. I don't usually feel the need to watch it, but it's not like it would be torture for me to have to sit through it. So C tier is where I think Hatari fits the best. Next up, we have Fort Apache, another B tier movie. I like it. It's part of the John Ford, I don't know what to call this, but it is kind of a trilogy because it seems like a lot of the characters cross over and it all takes place in the same spot. Fort Apache is one of them. I like it. It's rewatchable. It's about, of course, American Indian War time period there, so post-Civil War. All very entertaining stuff. I like this one. Again, well done. Acting, direction, writing, dialogue, all good stuff. So Fort Apache is a solid B tier movie. Next up, we have McHugh, which I believe is a C tier movie. It's better than Brannigan. If I'm gonna say anything specific about it, I think McHugh is better than Brannigan. It's another cop movie. Sometimes I confuse these two because they're kind of similar-ish, and they come out right next to each other. They're from about the same period. This is clearly where cop movies were on the uptick in popularity, and so you can see they were like, we got to get John Wayne in some cop movies. That'll blow everyone's socks off. McHugh's okay. Like I said, I think it's better than Brannigan, but it's obviously not one of my favorites. Next, we have McClintock, which, of course, as I said at the beginning of the movie, or the video, another one of my favorites. This one falls easily into A tier. It's not quite S tier territory, but I find McClintock to be one of his best. It's super rewatchable. It's not, a lot of people like movies specifically for violence or high stakes or whatever. McClintock doesn't have a whole lot of that going on. There's some of that kind of in the background, and it's funny because throughout this movie, they reference all these like big fights that they were in back in the day and when they were fighting Indians and all this sort of stuff. But you don't actually see any of that on screen. What's going on screen is more of a rom-com / dramedy type of thing where you've got stuff going on, but it's mostly just very lighthearted. I like McClintock, like I said, one of my favorites. And next we have one of the ones that is one of my least favorites, which is Hellfighters. Easily an F tier movie. Again, John Wayne's fine in this movie. It's nothing spectacular, but it's just not a setting where I'm very interested in watching him do anything. He plays I believe it's an international team of oil rig firefighters, and just not that good of a movie. I'm not into it. I watched it all the way through once, and I think I've tried watching it one or two other times while it was on in someone else's house and I sat down or whatever, and it's not good. It's hard to pay attention to. So definitely an F tier movie for me. If it's on, I'd rather turn it off or leave the room than sit there and watch it. Next we have Hondo, which is another solid B tier movie. So you'll probably find a lot of these fall into B tier, which is all to say, these are good enough movies. I like them. I watch them again. I've watched them several times. But if I'm listing out my top 10, it doesn't make it. Hondo's pretty good. I believe this is one of the first ones where you see one of John Wayne's real children in the movie. And this is the one that a lot of people have probably seen the clip online where he finds out the boy can't swim, and so he throws him into the river. I believe that's actually John Wayne's real son. So interesting fun fact there. It's a good enough movie. It falls kind of, for me, it reminds me of a lot of your daytime Western TV shows because it kind of fits all those same vibes. You know, guy comes in, there's a woman and she has a child, and they're not his, but he cares about them and takes care of them, and so they build an emotional connection, and, you know, he does the noble thing and saves them and all that sort of stuff. It's a feel-good movie. And again, relatively well done. No technical complaints about it. I like it. Hondo's a pretty good movie. And we're going to stick with that with Operation Pacific. Same sort of stuff. It's one of his war movies, of course, this time. I like it. Don't have any major complaints. Don't find it to be boring. It doesn't come off as pure war propaganda, which, you know, a lot of them are. But Operation Pacific is pretty good. I think John Wayne does a good job in this movie of keeping you interested in both the plot and his character in particular. Another B-tier movie, In Harm's Way. Another World War II naval movie. It seems like he did a lot more Navy movies than anything else. Back in my head, I used to picture him always as the Army guy, but maybe John Wayne just liked being on a boat more than anything else. In Harm's Way, again, pretty good. Not one of his most memorable roles, but as a movie, like if you just look at it as a movie in and of itself, solid enough, entertaining, well done all around. And again, doesn't just come off as chest-beating war propaganda, which I always find relatively insufferable. And speaking of things that I don't much care for, we have Island in the Sky, which is another F-tier movie. This one is I think it takes place during World War II, but it's not a war movie. He plays a pilot, I almost said pirate, of I believe it's a cargo plane, and they end up getting stranded somewhere in the Arctic Circle or whatever, and it's like a survival movie. It's hard to watch. It's incredibly boring. It's way too long. This movie probably would have been fine with all of the story beats that they have in it if it had been 30 minutes long, but for how long it is, there's just not enough going on in the movie, and I get it. You're stranded in the Arctic Circle, and it's a relatively, probably realistic story, but that doesn't make it a good movie, so definitely falls well within the F tier. This is a great example of something that this could be super historically authentic. I don't know if it's based on a true story, but if it is, I could believe that because it seems pretty realistic. That doesn't make it a good movie. So this is a great argument against the whole, oh, movies have to be 100% historically accurate. No. Big details should be accurate, but you shouldn't sacrifice all of the entertainment value for it. The movie needs to be good, otherwise it's just trash. So F tier movie, Island in the Sky, I don't recommend it. But then we have a movie that I do recommend, and it's The Cowboys. That's an A-tier movie. Another one of my favorites. Solid one. In this one, he's a rancher. He's got a bunch of cows. All of the adults in his area, or, you know, all of the unemployed, self-employed adult types in the area have run off for a gold rush. And so he can't get anyone to do this cattle drive. He can't hire any employees, which is fun. That really resonates in this day and age. So he has to go around and actually get cowboys. School season's almost over. He goes into town and he's like, I need people who are capable of riding a horse and herding cattle, but are still around because they're children, essentially. And he hires on a bunch of them, has to train them all the stuff, and takes them on this cattle drive. It's actually a really good movie. It's got probably some of his better acting in it as far as, like, depicting emotions. John Wayne's well known for being kind of a big wooden guy who doesn't show a lot of emotions, which works for a lot of his movies, because that's the character he's playing. But in The Cowboys, he actually gets some emotions, and it plays off relatively well. It's definitely a good movie. It's a long one, but it's worth a watch, especially if you've never seen it. So The Cowboys is an A-tier movie. Next up, we have Rooster Cogburn and the Lady, and this is kind of funny because I haven't talked about the first movie, but this is a direct sequel, and it is very good. So this one falls easily into the A-tier as well. So I like Rooster Cogburn and the Lady. It's very entertaining. All the acting is excellent in it. It's another one of his late career movies that just really showed that he was just hitting his stride when he died. But very, very good. Love this one. It's very amusing at parts. It's got stakes. It's got emotions. Makes you feel things. But also just very entertaining and excellent from a technical point of view. It is a direct sequel, which John Wayne didn't do a lot of, and it's obviously not as good as the first movie, but it's still very, very good. So A-tier movie easily. Next up, we have a C-tier movie, Reap the Wild Wind. Another early one that is fine. I don't hate it. Don't love it. Not super memorable. I can watch it if I've got nothing else to do. Got another B-tier movie with Red River. So like I predicted earlier, we were going to have a lot in the B tier. Red River's good. It's one that threw me through a loop a couple times the first few times I watched it, because they give him like older gray hair in the movie to make him seem like this older character, but it's actually from earlier in John Wayne's career, kind of like in the first third of probably where you'd consider most of his iconic movies to have come from. So it looks a little weird because he's got this gray hair that he doesn't really have even in his older movies, but he's clearly quite a bit younger. But story-wise and acting-wise and everything, it's a good movie. I like Red River. Not one of my favorites, but definitely one that, again, I don't mind watching. So Red River, solid B-tier movie. Moving on to a A-tier movie, we have Rio Lobo. This is the third in not a trilogy because they're totally unconnected stories, but 3 movies directed by the same director with essentially the same story. This is something you'll see a criticism. People will say John Wayne movies are all the same. That's not even remotely accurate. There's a ton of variety in these movies. Even if you just take all the westerns, only a few of them even share broadly the same story beats. But Rio Lobo is one out of 3 movies that I love all 3 of them, but they have very, very similar plot lines and almost the same character archetypes and everything. It's very, very strange. But Rio Lobo is very good. It's the last of these 3 that was made. It's got some great one-liners in it. It's very funny at parts, but also it's an action movie, essentially. It's a western, but it's got stakes, it's got action, it's got gunfights, it's got all the good stuff. Rio Lobo is an excellent film. So yeah, definitely an A-tier one there. Have another A-tier right after that with The Fighting Seabees. Probably my favorite war movie he ever did. It's World War II. It has to do with the foundation of the construction battalion in the U.S. Navy. You know, they were combat-trained construction workers, essentially, who could go in on these, in all the island warfare in the Pacific Theater and, you know, build airstrips and take care of all that stuff, and also defend themselves so they weren't constantly just being killed by the Japanese. And it's a great movie. Again, it's got some stakes. It's a great example of his early career where you get a little bit more of the drama and the emotions and all that sort of stuff going on in, without it just being sort of like a melodramatic love story. So Fighting Seabees, excellent film. Love it. One of the ones that I'll watch if I sit down, I'm like, I want to watch a John Wayne movie. What am I going to watch? This is definitely always a contender. So definitely an A-tier one. Next up, we have a B-tier movie with She Wore a Yellow Ribbon. So this is another one from that trilogy I was talking about earlier that are all kind of loosely connected. Fort Apache and She Wore a Yellow Ribbon are 2 of them. I believe She Wore a Yellow Ribbon is either my wife's favorite or second favorite John Wayne movie. She really likes that one. I like it too. It's, again, from that same period, the American Indian War, which is always interesting for American history, as it gets a lot less attention nowadays. All well done, interesting, and I like any movie where John Wayne has a mustache. So She Wore a Yellow Ribbon, solid B-tier movie. Next up, we have another B-tier movie with The Horse Soldiers. This one kind of falls, again, in a similar position historically, like time period wise. I believe this is post-Civil War, or maybe it is Civil War, but I can't remember exactly. But I think it's the American Indian War. Good enough movie. I watched this one a lot when I was younger. This is one of the ones we had on VHS. So there were 4 or 5 John Ford ones that we had, and this was one of them. And it's a good movie. I like it. Still like it to this day. No major complaints. Next up, we have a C-tier movie with The High and the Mighty. Another World War II war movie. This one's fine. I don't like it nearly as much as a lot of the other ones. I think that it gets kind of bogged down in exactly what story they're trying to tell, so it's never really blown me away. Then we have a B-tier World War II movie with The Longest Day, otherwise known as Der längste Tag. This one is about D-Day, so it's very action-packed for a John Wayne war movie. I like this one a lot, and it's actually pretty good history-wise. They don't nail it 100% on the historical accuracy with this one, but it's not bad. And they, of course, one of the advantages with a lot of the John Wayne World War II movies is you have the actual John Ford recorded World War II footage being used in the movies, and I always like that. So that's an advantage we get here. Longest Day is one of my favorite movies about D-Day. Next up, we have Tall in the Saddle, which I'll place confidently in the D tier. It's another one that it's not one of his earliest movies. It comes out, I believe this is in the 40s. It's better than a lot of his early B movies, more memorable at least, but still not getting into the period where he's really hitting his stride, so solid D tier. Then we have an A tier movie with The Alamo, and this is of course the one that he directed as well as starred in as Davy Crockett. This is, I believe, his first Oscar nomination was for The Alamo, and it was for Best Director. He didn't actually get it, but it is a very, very solid movie. I like that movie a lot. It's got some great one-liners in it, and of course, it's a decent retelling of the Alamo story. It's not, of course, all the way 100% historically accurate for a lot of reasons, one of which being it's a little bit too early to really get into the complexities, when this film was made, I should say, the complexities of the Alamo situation, and historically speaking, it's a lot more complicated than most people realize. But as far as depicting the legend of the Alamo, I think it does it very, very well, and of course, John Wayne is very entertaining in the film. So, solid A-tier movie, one of my favorites. Then we have a B-tier movie with In Old California. This one is another one that's not really, I mean, it's kind of a Western in that it takes place place in the American westward expansion, in this case, California, but it's not like a gunslinging shoot-'em-up Western. He plays a pharmacist in this movie, I believe, but it's very entertaining in its own way. This is another one that we had on VHS when I was young, and I watched quite a few times, and I do like it. And I didn't like it as much when I was a kid, but I like it more as an adult, so that's probably a good indication that it's at least a decent movie. Next, we have another A tier with The Searchers. This is one of, I believe, the only Westerns ever made with 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. I'm not going to double check that because I don't remember if it's still accurate. Maybe people have gone to review bombing old John Wayne movies, and The Searchers has fallen victim to that. But it's a great movie. The Searchers is really good, and it's actually a great example of a early movie in American history trying to tackle topics of like maybe not quite racism, but definitely bigotry. So in the movie, John Wayne's character has suffered at the hand of, I believe, Comanches. The Comanche tribe has done something horrible to his family at some time in the past. So he's got this trauma built in with them. And you see him really struggle to overcome that in any meaningful way. He has a very violent attitude towards them, and all the characters around him, although knowing like what this backstory is and also having similar situations, not having the same feelings. Like I said, it's an example of, in a long time ago when this film came out, actually seeing some attempt at that cultural commentary there, I guess you should say. I wouldn't say it's an anti-racist movie or anything like that, but it definitely shows racism, which a lot of movies, or bigotry, like I said, maybe not racism, but bigotry. A lot of movies back in the day would have never touched it, and The Searchers does it really well, but is also an extraordinarily well-made movie. Super good. So, love The Searchers, an excellent Western, definitely one of my favorite John Wayne movies of all time. And of course, next we've got another one of my favorites with Rio Bravo, our second S-tier movie on this list. This one is Ricky Nelson, Dean Martin, John Wayne. It's another one that is made by the same guy as Rio Lobo, with essentially the same plot, but Rio Bravo really nails it. It's, of course, great having Dean Martin in a movie because he's very entertaining, but this one, I love Rio Bravo. It's so good. John Wayne, of course, is your stereotypical small-town sheriff in this one, and he's got limited help fighting the big bad corrupt guy who's got all the money and all the power and all that sort of stuff. And he's got a drunk in Dean Martin and a young field hand or cowpoke or whatever you want to call him in Ricky Nelson who are helping him out. He's also got Stumpy, who is what's his name? It escapes me right now. Walter Brennan. It was Walter Brennan. He's in lots of movies at the time, and he's one of my favorites. And he's in there too. So I love Rio Bravo. It's one of John Wayne's longer movies, but it's definitely one of his best. So definitely an S-tier movie. Moving on, because I feel like we're taking a long time on this trail list just because I want to keep talking about John Wayne movies. We have The Big Trail, which another D tier. It's an early B movie, not that entertaining. In fact, The Big Trail might be John Wayne's first movie ever. It's fine. It's not horrible. It's not F tier in my opinion, but I don't much care for it. I'd, again, much rather not watch it than watch it. Next up, we have The Sons of Katie Elder, which is another solid A tier movie. I like The Sons of Katie Elder. This is another one with Dean Martin in it. This one depicts the tale of these four brothers. Their mother was this great person in the community and she died, and so they all have to come back to town from, all their varied places that they've all gone off to and, kind of figure things out for her after she was dead, her funeral, all that sort of stuff. And it's a really good story. I love this one. It's got the stereotypical bad guy who's kind of forgettable in the background. The best thing about this movie is the interactions you see between these brothers, because if you know much about having siblings and all that, it feels very realistic. So it's a very well done movie. I love The Sons of Katie Elder. Next up, we have True Grit, which if you know barely anything about John Wayne, you probably have heard about True Grit because it's one of the best movies of all time, and it's definitely one of his best. In fact, it's the one he won an Oscar for best leading actor. True Grit is fantastic. It's an adaptation of a book. There's a newer one with Jeff Bridges in it, which again, he's fine. I don't dislike Jeff Bridges. He's a good enough actor and everything, and the movie itself is fine too. It's not as good as this one. This one's better. It's got John Wayne in it, playing in some of his best acting ever. It's an extraordinarily good movie. He's playing Rooster Cogburn in here, and this is of course the one that I referenced earlier when I said Rooster Cogburn and the Lady is also very good, but it's not as good as the original. That's because the original's True Grit, and it is excellent. And it's funny because my wife agrees that it's very good. She watched it with me and she liked it a lot. It's one of her favorites, but she can't stand the girl in the movie, and I said, but that's part part of it is this girl in there, the actress for her, and I'm not sure who plays her, but she does a really good job of portraying this very particular character. And the best parts of the movie is her and John Wayne bouncing off each other for like dialogue and stuff. So True Grit is one of my favorites. It's one of the best ones of all time. Again, definitely in the category of if you're only going to watch a couple John Wayne movies, True Grit has to be one of them. Next up, we have a B-tier movie with Rio Grande or Rio Grande. This is another one I had on VHS as a small child and watched quite a bit. Pretty good. Not related to Rio Bravo or Rio Lobo. I know a lot of people get confused about that, but I believe Rio might just mean river, but I'm not 100% certain. But it's pretty good. It's another one where he plays a horse soldier, so from the American Indian period there, American Indian War period, I should say. Fairly good movie. Another, I believe, John Ford directed one, so it's got that classic John Wayne vibe. Not bad. I like it. Following that, we have another B tier with Wake of the Red Witch, another one I had on VHS as a kid and watched a bunch of times. This one, he sails a boat. I can't remember exactly what he is, if he's a cargo hauler or something else. It's not a military movie. I vaguely remember something about an octopus with this one. I know I like the movie, because every time I watch it, I'm like, dang, that's a good movie. But I get confused. And the funny thing is, I believe there's 2 John Wayne movies where he either gets killed by or has to, like, fight or something like that, an octopus or a squid or something like that. I think it's an octopus in one movie and a squid in another. I think Wake of the Red Witch is another one where, like, his boat gets attacked by a kraken or something. Whatever the case is, it sounds like I haven't seen the movie, but trust me, I have, and I like it. I just don't remember all the details. But Wake of the Red Witch is pretty good, and it's definitely B tier for me. Next up, we have another A tier with El Dorado. This is another one that falls into the Rio Bravo and Rio Lobo circle of basically the same story. El Dorado is, I believe, the first one that was made out of these 3, and it's very, very good. Again, I don't have a ton of things to say about it because I've already kind of talked about it with Rio Lobo and Rio Bravo. One of my favorite movies, solid Western. Next, we have one that I'm sure is a bit of a contention for most people, and you probably can't tell detail-wise from the picture here, but we have The Conqueror, which is an F-tier movie. In this movie, and I'm not joking about this, John Wayne plays Genghis Khan. So this one's bad for lots of reasons, one of which being it's kind of hard to take John Wayne seriously in this role for a number of reasons, one of which being just very poorly cast. Genghis Khan, by most estimates, is probably around 5'6", and of course he's a steppe Asian, not like step as in stepfather, but S-T-E-P-P-E, you know, comes from the continent of Asia, but is of the steppe, peoples of the steppe, I should say. About 5'6". John Wayne is a super American 6'4" white guy, so I don't know that I would have cast Genghis Khan, even though, or John Wayne is Genghis Khan, even though, yes, John Wayne was the biggest star at the time, so you're gonna make a movie about Genghis Khan, I get it, but it's bad casting. So that's one reason I don't like it. Another one being, it's just not a very good movie, and the third reason being, this is the movie that killed John Wayne. So they filmed a bunch of this downwind from some nuclear testing sites, and John Wayne and pretty much everyone else on set for this movie ended up getting cancer from it. And John Wayne, of course, died from cancer. He had it, I believe he got it in this movie, or while filming this movie, and then was fighting it, went into remission, etc., and then it came back and killed him. And so, not only is The Conqueror a bad movie, that was a bad idea, and John Wayne never should have played Genghis Khan, but it also killed him. So I'm not a fan of it, and it definitely falls into F tier. Next up, we have Sands of Iwo Jima, an A tier movie, another one of his war movies that is another one of my favorites. Plays a Marine, I believe, in this one, once again in the Japanese theater of World War II. Excellent movie all around, really like it. I've watched it a bunch of times, I'll watch it a bunch more. Next we have a B-tier movie with The Quiet Man. This one is another one, this one's probably best described as a rom-com between John Wayne and, of course, the ever-excellent Maureen O'Hara. Takes place in Ireland, so John Wayne does a fairly bad Irish accent in this movie. But that being said, very entertaining movie, always love it. If you want to watch a John Wayne movie that has very little violence and I'm pretty sure no gunshots in it, The Quiet Man's an excellent one. Another B-tier movie, The Shootist, John Wayne's final movie, the last one before he died, and I believe he died very shortly after this movie was finished. It's pretty good, I like it. Again, this is one that falls into the B-tier very solidly for, I've seen it several times, I'll probably watch it more times. I don't like certain things about it. For one thing, just the emotional thing, knowing that it's the last movie he ever made and then he died, and so it's always kind of sad. But also, it's got more of that nihilism that I've talked about before, and it handles it better than Cahill does, because at least the movie itself is entertaining and it's got some good lines and the dialogue's a lot more solid and memorable. But overall, you know, very solid movie. Definitely recommend watching it for any hardcore John Wayne fans that haven't seen it, because it's the last one he ever made. It's his Hurt. So, you know, Johnny Cash recorded Hurt. People consider that to be, you know, him saying goodbye. The Shootist is like that for John Wayne. So, solid movie. Another B-tier movie with the train robbers. I believe he's kind of a bad guy in this movie, and it's an ensemble cast, so it can be a little bit easier maybe for it to be a good movie, because you've got several people all doing a pretty good job in this movie. Another one from the late career. Pretty solid. I definitely recommend it. I like it a lot. Of course, we have another F-tier movie with They Were Expendable. I don't like this one at all. It's a war movie. It's got multiple problems. There's lots of story elements and like moral problems that I have with the plot of They Were Expendable. I don't like it. I don't enjoy it. And I just don't think it's very well done. Pretty bad movie overall. Then we have The War Wagon, which is another one of my favorites. Falls easily into the A tier. This is, of course, John Wayne and Kirk Douglas. Always a good pairing, and excellent in this case. In this one, again, it's kind of borderline. He's kind of an anti-hero in this one. I don't want to spoil too much, but their whole plan in this movie is essentially to rob this gold shipment, and it's pretty well done. It's another one with an original theme written for the movie that basically tells you what's going on right in the opening credits. It's very enjoyable. I like this one a lot. I've seen it a bunch of times. Another B-tier movie with the Comancheros. This one, I believe, has to. Now I can't remember with what the Comancheros were. I'd have to watch the movie again. I remember the basic plot of the movie, but either the Comancheros are a tribe of American Indians like the Comanches, or what I think it is a gang made up of like cattle rustlers or something, and they have something to do with the Comanches. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it's a fair enough movie. I've watched it a whole bunch of times. I bought this one when I was in high school, and it was actually one of the first DVDs that I ever personally bought with my own money. You know, once you get to that stage of buying things like that, you get to choose whatever you want. This was one of the first ones, and I had never seen it up until then, and I do like it. I believe somebody gets scalped in there. But anyway, Comancheros is a solid enough movie. B tier for sure. Next up, we have The Fighting Kentuckian, which is one of my favorites. Definitely an A tier movie. This is a black and white, early career. It's one of the exceptions to the rule. I always tell people the John Wayne movies don't start getting real good until like the mid-40s, but The Fighting Kentuckian is one of his earlier ones. It's, like I said, it's a black and white movie, and it's set early. It's set, I believe, like within a decade of the War of 1812, so it's shortly after that. It's way before the Civil War, so time period-wise, it's one of his earlier ones, and it's really good. I love this movie. It's got Oliver Hardy in it, who is hilarious, and they play off each other very well. It's one of my absolute favorites. I'm sure even for a lot of the John Wayne fans out there that you probably haven't seen it, I definitely recommend watching it because I love it. Next, we have one of the only ones that I actually took a while to decide if I wanted to put it in two different tiers. We have the Green Berets. Ultimately, I put it in B tier. I was considering C tier. I like it well enough. I think it's a bit overrated. A lot of people will say this is like their favorite John Wayne movie. I don't much care for it. I think it strays too far into American war propaganda and not very well, because it's just not a very well done movie overall, so I don't really like it that much. It's okay. You know, I don't want to make it sound like I hate it, because I didn't put it in C tier. I've seen it several times. I'll probably watch it more times, and I've placed it in a tier with a lot of movies that I do consider to be pretty good, but it was close. It almost landed in the C tier because of the couple things about it that I don't much like. Next, we have another B tier with Stagecoach. This is another one that I think a lot of people have probably heard of. It's one of his more famous ones. I like it well enough. It falls into a lot of the John Wayne Western tropes, but it is a pretty solid film. And then we are left with two of my favorites. The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance is an A tier movie. This one is one of the more interesting film styles that you'll ever see John Wayne in, because it does a lot of flash forwards and flashbacks, and so if you're not paying attention, you probably won't understand the story, because it's what the title is, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. It's James Stewart telling a story about the man who shot Liberty Valance. And so I like it. It's entertaining. Of course, it's great anytime you can get two big stars like that on screen. John Wayne was huge at this time, and so was James Stewart. They were both big Western stars, and this was the first and possibly only time they both starred in a Western together. And it's a good one. It's definitely one of his better films. So I like it. I recommend it. Lastly, we have The Undefeated, which is the last one that I'll be putting belong in the S tier. I love The Undefeated. It is by far one of John Wayne's best movies ever. It's another late career movie for him. He stars in it with Rock Hudson, who plays a disaffected ex-Confederate general or colonel or something like that from the Civil War. John Wayne, of course, was on the Union side because, you know, he's pro-American, and I believe the only movie where he ever was depicted as having fought for or sympathized with the Confederate cause was actually The Searchers. I think in that movie he had played a Confederate sergeant or something like that, but not in the movie because it takes place after the Civil War. They just reference it. Every other movie that ever references the Civil War, John Wayne always plays a Union cavalry officer. So it's interesting in that way. But in The Undefeated, it's that too. It picks up at the end of the Civil War, and you see John Wayne going off to be a cattle rancher. That's what he wants to do. And then you see Rock Hudson leading his Confederate group who doesn't want to live in the United States anymore because they're, you know, like I said, disaffected, and they're heading to Mexico. This is a real historical thing that happened. And they just keep running into each other over and over again. And so eventually they kind of turn out to be friends or whatever. And of course, John Wayne has to end up helping them. So it's a good movie. I love it. I don't want to spoil it because, like I said, it's one of the few that I consider truly S tier. So this is my tier list. Like I said, he's been in 140 movies. These are the ones that I've seen and that I am 100% positive that I've seen. If I didn't list any on here that you like, definitely let me know down in the comment section. And when I say that you like, I don't just mean like, oh, I remember watching this with my great grandpa and blah, blah, blah. It's fond memories. I just want to know if it's a good movie. So if you've got any recommendations that I haven't listed here that are good movies, let me know. If I've ranked any here that you seriously disagree with, share that argument. I want to know why you disagree with it, because maybe I'm not watching the movie with the right lens and I should watch it again after having read your description for why it's actually a much better movie than I've rated it. If you disagree with any of the ones I've ranked rather high, you're wrong. I'm definitely right about all these S and A tier ratings. I could hear arguments on the B tier, either moving up or down, but convincing me that any of these ones should be moved is going to be hard as well as these ones. The B tier is the only one I'll hear debates on. But anyway, that's all for today. I know this isn't super historically accurate, but that's kind of what I use this channel for. It's history and media. I know I don't do a lot of media, but this is an example of that. So hope you enjoyed the video, but we'll see you next time.